Hey, everyone. Welcome to Storytelling Time, the place where every story comes alive. If you love getting lost in thrilling tales, gripping mysteries, and epic adventures, you're in the right spot. I'm your storyteller, and here, we don't just tell stories, we bring them to life. Whether it's fantasy, mystery, horror, or even a bit of comedy, we're all about immersion. So grab a snack, get comfy, and prepare for a journey that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single chapter. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the Storytelling Time family. Let's dive into the stories that await, starting now. The hum of the tires on the asphalt was the only sound I could reliably count on. Everything else was swallowed by the black. Not just a little dim, the kind of dark that makes you squint, this was a total eclipse pressed against the windshield. My headlights, or rather the gaping sockets where they used to be, offered no rebuttal to the night. I was driving blind, a fool navigating by the grace of muscle memory and a desperate hope that the road ahead wouldn't suddenly decide to turn. Each mile marker I couldn't see felt like a small victory against the oppressive darkness, but also a fresh wave of the gnawing loneliness. It was a physical ache, a hollow space in my chest that the silence only amplified. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white against the worn leather, as if trying to physically hold on to some semblance of control in this lightless void. My thoughts, as they often did in these self-imposed night drives, began to drift to the peculiar and the painful. Peter surfaced first, as he often did. Poor Peter, with his unwavering dream of becoming a boxer. I could still see his earnest face, the way his brow would furrow with determination whenever he spoke of it. Boxers don't need arms to box, he'd insisted, his voice rising in frustrated defiance after I'd stated the obvious. The memory always carried a sting of guilt. Had I been cruel? Merely stating a fact. The image of Peter in the ring, flailing uselessly, the sickening thud of leather against flesh, the eventual vacant stare, it was a replay I couldn't seem to stop. Brain damage. All for a dream that was physically impossible. A sudden jolt, a dull thud beneath the car, yanked me back to the present. My heart leaped into my throat. What was that? I strained my eyes, peering into the impenetrable blackness, but saw nothing. Fear, cold and sharp, pricked at my skin. But even stronger was the immediate return of that familiar solitude. Whatever I had hit was now behind me, and I was still alone in this suffocating night. Then, a shift. A presence. It wasn't a sound or a sight, but a subtle change in the atmosphere of the car. A weight in the back seat. I glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing only the endless black reflecting back at me. But the feeling persisted. I wasn't alone anymore. A sliver of relief, unexpected and almost shameful, eased the tightness in my chest. The darkness continued, an unbroken canvas outside the windows. My mind, still reeling from the unseen impact, now wandered to another ghost from my past. My girlfriend from school. Sarah. I'd been so fixated on this ridiculous notion of skinniness. If you can't fit between these two fence posts, you're not skinny enough, I declared, the words laced with a youthful cruelty I now cringed to remember. Sarah, with her sweet smile and gentle nature, had tried. I could still picture her struggling, her face red with effort, the soft curves of her body pressing against the unyielding wood. The sickening crack, the silence that followed, the sheer, horrifying finality of it. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and stinging. Shame, a heavy, suffocating blanket, settled over me. What a terrible person I had been. You okay, son? The voice, raspy and unexpected, came from the back seat. I nearly swerved, my grip on the wheel tightening again. Yeah, I managed, my voice a choked whisper. Yeah, I'm okay. Another bump. This one felt softer, less jarring. Again, I saw nothing in the mirror. But the feeling of presence in the back intensified. Now there were two of them. The loneliness, though still a shadow, had receded slightly. Two unseen companions in my blind journey. So it was me, driving through a void, and two unknown figures in the back. Peter and Sarah flickered at the edges of my awareness, their silent accusations a constant hum beneath the surface. Then, a faint glow. Not from outside, but from within the car. A soft, ethereal light began to emanate from the back seat, illuminating the forms of my passengers. One was an old man, his face etched with a gentle sadness. The other, a middle-aged man with a bewildered expression. Neither had been there before, not in any physical sense. As the light intensified, spilling into the front of the car, it cast a ghastly glow on the road behind me. And there, lying on the dark asphalt, was the crumpled form of the old man. Then Peter and Sarah joined the illumination, their spectral forms glowing with an even brighter intensity in the back seat. And beside the old man on the road, I saw another body. Middle-aged. Familiar in a way that made my stomach clench. You are messed up. Your headlights aren't broken. You just enjoy driving at night time with no light source. The old man's voice, though spectral, held a chilling clarity. He was right. The old man's words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. You are messed up. Your headlights aren't broken. You just enjoy driving at night time with no light source. Enjoy. The word felt foreign, repulsive even, as it echoed in the confines of the car. Yet, a cold tendril of truth snaked its way through my denial. Had there been a perverse sense of control in the blindness? A feeling of being untethered from the mundane world, adrift in a void where only my senses, however limited, existed? The fear had always been a sharp, unwelcome companion, but beneath it, had there been something else? Something thrilling. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. The image of the old man's lifeless body on the road was seared into my mind, a horrifying counterpoint to the gentle sadness in his spectral eyes. And the middle-aged man beside him, who was he? Why did his bewildered expression feel vaguely familiar, like a half-forgotten dream? The spectral glow from the back seat pulsed softly, illuminating Peter and Sarah as well. Peter's ghostly form still bore the faint bruises of his final fight, a permanent testament to a dream that had ended in tragedy. Sarah's translucent figure seemed fragile, a whisper of the vibrant girl she once was. Their silent presence was a weight, a tangible manifestation of my guilt. Who are you? I finally choked out, my voice trembling. I addressed the darkness, the spectral figures, the unseen road ahead. The old man sighed, a sound like rustling leaves. You know who we are, son. Deep down, you've known all along. His words were a key turning in a rusty lock. Fragments of memory, previously dismissed or buried, began to surface. The impatient honk of a horn just before the first thud. A fleeting glimpse of a figure in my side mirror, dismissed as a trick of the non-existent light. The middle-aged man. A face I'd seen arguing with someone on a street corner a few weeks ago, a flash of anger in his eyes. Had I simply driven on? A wave of nausea washed over me. The bumps hadn't been random debris. They had been people. My fear of being alone at night had somehow twisted into a monstrous indifference, a self-absorption so profound that I hadn't even registered the impact of taking a life. Why are you here? I asked, the question laced with a desperate plea for some logical explanation in this descent into the surreal. Peter's spectral gaze seemed to fix on the back of my head. Sarah's translucent hand appeared to reach out, a gesture of sorrow or perhaps accusation. The middle-aged man remained silent, his bewildered expression unchanging, a mirror reflecting my own growing confusion and horror. "We're here because you brought us here," the old man said, his voice weary. "You pulled us from the world, and now we're tethered to you, riding in your darkness." His words were a chilling indictment. My loneliness hadn't been a void, it had been a vacuum, sucking in the consequences of my actions. These weren't just figments of my imagination. They felt real. Their presence was a palpable weight in the car, a silent judgment. The road ahead remained invisible, yet the landscape of my mind was now brutally illuminated. The darkness outside was nothing compared to the darkness within me, the darkness that had allowed me to drive blindly, to disregard the possibility of other lives sharing the night. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my hands ached. The urge to stop, to leap out of the car and into the unknown darkness, was overwhelming. But a morbid curiosity, a terrifying need to understand the extent of my actions, kept me rooted in the driver's seat. What do you want?" I finally stammered, the question directed at the spectral figures in the rearview mirror, though I still couldn't bring myself to look directly at them. Silence hung in the air for a long moment, broken only by the continued hum of the tires on the unseen road. Then, the old man spoke again, his voice softer this time, tinged with a sorrow that mirrored my own burgeoning despair. "We want you to see, son. We want you to finally see what you've done." The old man's words, "We want you to finally see what you've done," echoed in my mind, each syllable a hammer blow against the wall of my denial. See? I was seeing them now, weren't I? The spectral forms in my back seat, the imagined weight of their presence. But perhaps he meant something more, a deeper kind of seeing, a recognition of the threads that had woven this terrifying night. Peter. My memories of him were a tangled mix of admiration and a subtle, perhaps unconscious, condescension. We'd been teenagers, full of bravado and ill-conceived dreams. Peter's ambition to box, despite his lack of arms, had been a constant source of amusement and awkwardness for our group. I remembered the laughter, not malicious, but certainly dismissive. Had my comment about needing arms been delivered with a smirk? Had I truly believed he was delusional, or was there a flicker of admiration for his audacity that I'd masked with sarcasm? The memory of his fight was vivid and brutal. The hushed anticipation of the small crowd, the bell ringing with a jarring finality, and then the clumsy, desperate lunges. The other boxer, a burly kid with arms like tree trunks, hadn't known how to react at first, a mixture of pity and confusion on his face. But Peter had come at him with a fierce, almost manic energy, and the fight had quickly turned ugly. The sickening thud of gloves against Peter's head, the way his body crumpled. I'd felt a wave of horrified pity then, a shame at our earlier jokes. Had I visited him in the hospital? The memory was hazy, a blur of sterile white and hushed whispers. Had I offered empty words of encouragement, masking my own discomfort? Then there was Sarah. The memory of her was sharper, edged with a more potent guilt. We were younger then, barely on the cusp of adulthood, navigating the treacherous waters of first love and burgeoning insecurities. My obsession with an ideal of skinniness now seemed grotesque, a manifestation of my own fragile ego. Why had it mattered so much? What void in myself had I been trying to fill by imposing such a cruel standard on her? I remembered the day at the park, the old wooden fence with its awkwardly spaced posts. My casual, thoughtless challenge. Sarah's eager smile, her willingness to please. The way her laughter had turned to strained grunts as she tried to squeeze through the gap. The sickening crack of the wood splintering, the sudden silence, her small, choked cry. I had panicked, tried to pull her free, but it was too late. Her face, contorted in pain and fear, was the last image I'd seen before the world had tilted and the screams had begun. Had I truly believed it was an accident? Had I convinced myself that she was just clumsy? The truth, cold and undeniable, was that my vanity, my cruel demand, had directly led to her death. The shame that washed over me now was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The spectral figures in the back seat remained silent witnesses to my tormented recollections. Peter's translucent face seemed etched with a quiet sorrow, perhaps a reflection of his own shattered dreams. Sarah's form flickered slightly, as if a gentle breeze stirred her spectral presence. The middle-aged man's bewildered expression hadn't changed, a constant, unsettling question mark. As these memories played out, vivid and visceral, the darkness outside the car seemed to intensify, pressing in on all sides. The unseen road continued its relentless journey, carrying me deeper into this nightmarish reckoning. The hum of the tires, once a constant, now seemed like a mournful drone, a soundtrack to my unfolding guilt. The old man cleared his throat, a dry, rasping sound that cut through my internal turmoil. "These are the shadows you carry, son. They've been driving with you long before tonight." His words were a stark reminder. This night, this darkness, these spectral passengers, they weren't a random occurrence. They were the culmination of choices, of careless words and cruel actions. What now? The question hung heavy in the airless car. The memories had been a brutal unveiling, stripping away the layers of my self-deception. But where did this newfound awareness lead? The weight of my memories settled like a shroud. Peter's broken ambition, Sarah's tragic end, the vague, unsettling image of the middle-aged man, they were no longer just fleeting thoughts but vivid, painful realities replayed in the theater of my mind. And now, their spectral forms occupied the very space behind me, silent judges in my self-inflicted darkness. Peter's translucent figure shifted. A faint sound, like the rustle of dry leaves, emanated from him. Then, a spectral hand, still bearing the faint discoloration of old bruises, reached forward and lightly touched the back of my headrest. The touch was cold, not chillingly so, but with the absence of warmth, the uncanny coolness of something that no longer lived. I flinched violently, my hands tightening on the steering wheel. The car swerved slightly. Don't touch me," I stammered, my voice a strained whisper. Sarah's spectral form also seemed to stir. A soft sigh, laced with an immeasurable sadness, drifted from the back seat. It was a sound that resonated deep within me, a mournful echo of the choked cry I remembered from that day at the park. The middle-aged man, who had remained silent and bewildered, now leaned forward slightly. His spectral eyes, wide and questioning, met mine in the rearview mirror. Though his lips didn't move, a faint impression of a question formed in my mind, a silent inquiry, "Why?" The old man's voice, raspy but firm, broke the unsettling silence. "We are part of you now, son. Your regrets made us real here, in your darkness. You can't just shut us out. But, why are you showing yourselves now?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why tonight?" Peter's spectral hand remained on the headrest, a constant, unnerving presence. "Because you were ready to see. You've been driving in the dark for too long, pretending not to see the shadows you've cast." Sarah's sigh echoed again, and this time, a faint whisper accompanied it, a single word that sent a shiver down my spine, "Why?" The middle-aged man continued to stare, his silent question a heavy weight in the car. I tried to focus on the unseen road ahead, but their presence in the rearview mirror was a constant distraction, a horrifying reminder of my unseen journey and its deadly consequences. "What do you want from me?" I pleaded, the question directed at all three of them. "What can I do?" The old man's spectral gaze seemed to pierce through my fear and denial. "You need to acknowledge us, son. Truly acknowledge what you've done. Not just as fleeting memories, but as real lives you've extinguished." Peter's spectral hand tightened slightly on the headrest, a silent pressure. Sarah's whisper came again, clearer this time, laced with a hint of sorrowful accusation, you left me." The middle-aged man finally spoke, his voice a faint, ethereal murmur, filled with confusion. "The corner. I was just arguing." His words were fragmented, a brief glimpse into his final moments. A street corner. An argument. And then, me. Driving blindly through the night. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. These weren't just abstract representations of my guilt. They were the echoes of lives I had carelessly ended. Their spectral presence was a direct consequence of my actions, a haunting reminder of the darkness I had embraced. The car continued its blind journey, but the isolation I had sought in the darkness was gone. Replaced by the tangible presence of those I had harmed, their silent accusations and lingering pain filling the void. The darkness within me, the darkness that had allowed me to drive without headlights, now reflected the darkness I had brought into their lives. The cold touch on the headrest, the sorrowful whispers, the bewildered question in the rearview mirror, it was no longer a psychological torment confined to my thoughts. They were here, in the car with me, their spectral presence a chilling reality. The flimsy walls of my denial had crumbled, leaving me exposed to the full weight of my actions. A wave of nausea churned in my stomach. I swallowed hard, trying to keep the rising panic at bay. My breath hitched in my throat, and the air in the car suddenly felt thick and suffocating, heavy with their unspoken accusations. I didn't see you," I stammered, the words weak and inadequate even to my own ears. How could I not have seen them? The old man's accusation echoed, "You just enjoy driving at night time with no light source." The horrifying truth was that seeing hadn't been a priority. My self-imposed blindness had made me a danger, a silent predator on the night roads. Peter's spectral hand remained on the headrest, a constant, unnerving pressure. It wasn't forceful, but its very lack of warmth was a chilling reminder of his stolen future. His silent presence was a tangible weight of unfulfilled potential, a career never launched, punches never thrown in triumph. Sarah's soft whispers continued, each one a pinprick of guilt. "Why, you said, skinny." Her fragmented words painted a vivid picture of my callous cruelty, the devastating impact of my shallow demands. The image of her struggling, her laughter turning to pain, flashed behind my eyelids. The middle-aged man's faint, confused murmur, "the corner, arguing," painted a fleeting but tragic scene. A mundane moment, a petty disagreement, abruptly cut short by my heedless passage through the darkness. His bewilderment was perhaps the most unsettling of all, a stark reminder of the randomness and finality of death at my hands. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. I wanted to pull over, to stop this nightmarish journey, but a perverse sense of dread kept my foot on the accelerator. It was as if I was being compelled to continue, driven by an unseen force towards an unknown destination. The darkness outside the car seemed to mirror the turmoil within me. Every unseen curve in the road felt like another twist of the knife, every rustle of unseen leaves a ghostly whisper. The hum of the tires, once a monotonous drone, now sounded like a mournful lament. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the already non-existent view. Shame, raw and agonizing, washed over me. I was a monster, driving through the night with the spectral consequences of my monstrous actions as my only companions. "I'm sorry," I choked out, the words a broken sob. "I'm so sorry." The old man's voice, though still raspy, held a hint of weary resignation. "Sorry isn't enough, son. You need to understand the weight of what you've done. You need to carry it, not just for this night, but for what comes after." Peter's spectral hand finally withdrew from the headrest, a small but significant release. Sarah's whispers softened slightly, though the underlying sadness remained. The middle-aged man's bewildered gaze in the rearview mirror softened too, replaced by a look that seemed almost resigned. Their reactions, however subtle, were a stark contrast to the raging storm within me. My guilt was a living thing, clawing at my insides. The darkness within me, which had once been a source of perverse comfort, now felt like a suffocating prison. The journey continued, the unseen miles stretching out before me. I was no longer just driving in the dark, I was driving with the dead, their silent presence a constant, agonizing reminder of the lives I had extinguished. And in their spectral gazes, I saw not just accusation, but a profound and unsettling sorrow. A sorrow that mirrored the growing chasm in my own soul. The apology had felt hollow, a meaningless word swallowed by the oppressive darkness and the silent accusations of my spectral passengers. Sorry wasn't enough, the old man had said, and his words resonated with a chilling truth. What could ever be enough to atone for the lives I had so carelessly taken? The weight of their presence in the back seat was a constant physical and emotional burden. Peter's spectral form represented a future stolen, a potential unfulfilled. Sarah embodied the devastating consequences of my vanity and cruelty. The middle-aged man's bewildered silence was a stark reminder of the random, senseless nature of his death at my hands. They were the living, or rather, unliving, embodiments of my profound failures. My mind replayed the memories relentlessly, each scene sharper, each detail more agonizing than before. Peter's hopeful face as he spoke of boxing, Sarah's eager smile before her fatal attempt to please me, the fleeting glimpse of the middle-aged man arguing on the street corner, these images were now inextricably linked to the horrifying reality of their spectral presence in my car. Sleep deprivation was beginning to take its toll. The edges of my vision blurred, and the line between reality and hallucination felt increasingly thin. Were these ghosts truly here, or were they figments of a mind teetering on the brink of collapse? The chilling certainty of their presence, their subtle interactions, argued against mere figments of imagination. They felt too real, their sorrow too palpable. The darkness outside the car no longer felt like a comforting escape. It had become a suffocating prison, amplifying my guilt and isolation. Every shadow seemed to hold a spectral form, every rustle of wind a mournful whisper. The hum of the tires, once a neutral background noise, now echoed the relentless drumming of my own anxiety. I found myself talking to them, whispering apologies into the darkness, recounting the events as I remembered them, trying to explain the inexplicable. But my words felt inadequate, lost in the vast emptiness of the night. They offered no verbal response, only their silent presence, their spectral gazes fixed on the back of my head or reflected in the rearview mirror. The old man's occasional pronouncements were the only breaks in the oppressive silence. His words were often cryptic, focusing on the need to see and understand. Peter and Sarah communicated through faint sounds and subtle gestures, their sorrow and lingering pain a constant undercurrent. The middle-aged man remained largely silent, his bewildered expression a mirror to my own confusion and growing despair. A profound sense of loneliness, deeper than my initial fear of driving alone, began to consume me. It was the loneliness of absolute culpability, the isolation of knowing that I was responsible for their spectral presence, for their unfinished lives. There was no one to share this burden with, no one to offer solace or understanding. I was trapped in this nightmarish journey with the ghosts of my past actions. The unseen road stretched endlessly before me, a metaphor for the long and arduous path of reckoning that lay ahead. I had sought solace in the darkness, but it had only brought me face to face with the darkness within myself. And now, I was forced to confront it, illuminated by the spectral glow of those I had harmed. The question of what to do next gnawed at me. Could I ever truly atone for what I had done? Was there any way to break free from this spectral companionship? Or was this my eternal punishment, to drive forever in the darkness with the ghosts of my past? The weight of their silent accusations, the echoes of their fragmented words, had begun to chip away at the wall of my self-absorption. The darkness within, once a perverse comfort, now felt like a suffocating prison. The realization that my actions had directly led to their spectral presence was a burden almost too heavy to bear. A new impulse began to stir within me, a desperate need to break free from this nightmarish cycle. Driving blindly into the darkness, pretending not to see, had brought me to this horrifying point. Perhaps the only way forward was to do the opposite, to confront the darkness, both literal and metaphorical. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, but this time, it wasn't out of fear or a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable. It was a newfound resolve, however fragile. I needed to see. I needed to understand. My gaze flickered to the dashboard, to the switch that controlled the headlights. It had been untouched, dormant, for who knows how long. A symbol of my willful blindness. A sudden urge, sharp and insistent, compelled me to reach for it. My fingers brushed against the cool plastic. A tremor ran through my hand. It felt like an act of rebellion, a defiance of the darkness I had embraced. Hesitantly, I flicked the switch. Nothing. Disappointment, sharp and immediate, washed over me. Of course. They were broken. That had been my initial thought, my convenient excuse for driving in the dark. But the old man's words echoed again, "Your headlights aren't broken. You just enjoy driving at night time with no light source." A cold dread settled in my stomach. Had I been lying to myself all along? Had the broken headlights been a fabrication, a convenient justification for my morbid fascination with the darkness? Driven by a desperate need for clarity, I pulled over to the side of the unseen road. The sudden stillness amplified the spectral presence in the back seat. Peter, Sarah, and the middle-aged man seemed to lean forward slightly, their silent gazes fixed on me. I fumbled for my phone, its screen a small beacon in the overwhelming darkness. The battery was low, a fitting metaphor for my dwindling hope. I activated the flashlight function, the weak beam cutting a small swathe through the inky blackness. Getting out of the car felt like stepping into a void. The air was cold and still, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and unseen foliage. The beam of my phone danced across the front of my car, finally illuminating the headlight casings. And there they were. Intact. The glass wasn't shattered, the bulbs weren't broken. They were simply off. A wave of nausea, stronger than before, washed over me. The old man's words were a brutal truth. I hadn't been forced to drive in the dark. I had chosen it. The realization was a crushing weight, adding another layer of guilt to the already unbearable burden. My blindness hadn't been a misfortune, it had been a deliberate act, a manifestation of something deeply flawed within me. Turning back to the car, the beam of my phone illuminated the spectral figures in the back seat. Their silent gazes seemed to hold a mixture of sorrow and a strange sort of expectation. A new thought, terrifying and yet strangely compelling, began to form in my mind. If the darkness was a reflection of my inner state, then perhaps confronting the literal darkness was the first step towards confronting the darkness within. With a newfound, albeit shaky, resolve, I got back into the driver's seat. My fingers found the headlight switch again. This time, instead of a hesitant flick, I pushed it firmly. And then, there was light. Two beams of pale yellow cut through the darkness, illuminating the road ahead, the trees lining the sides, the world that had been hidden from me. The sudden illumination was almost blinding, and for a moment, I felt disoriented, exposed. The spectral figures in the back seat seemed to dim slightly in the sudden light, their forms becoming less distinct. But they were still there. The journey had changed. I was no longer driving blindly. But the ghosts of my past were still my companions. The darkness outside might have receded, but the darkness within remained, waiting to be confronted in this newfound light. The sudden illumination felt jarring, almost violent, after the long hours of absolute darkness. The world outside the car, previously a terrifying void of the unknown, now snapped into focus. The beam of the headlights revealed the asphalt stretching ahead, the blurred shapes of trees lining the roadside, even the faint glint of dew on unseen foliage. It was a world that had existed all along, hidden only by my willful blindness. The spectral figures in the back seat seemed to react to the light. Their ethereal glow dimmed, as if the harsh reality of the headlights made their presence less potent, less dominant. But they were still there, their forms clearly visible now in the rearview mirror. Peter's translucent image, the faint bruises on his face starker in the light. Sarah's sorrowful gaze, her spectral hand resting on the seat. The middle-aged man's bewildered expression, now tinged with a hint of something else, recognition. With a deep breath, I pulled the car to a complete stop on the side of the road. The engine idled quietly, the only sound besides the gentle rustling of unseen leaves in the night breeze. The sudden silence felt heavy, charged with unspoken tension. Turning in my seat, I faced them directly for the first time since the light had come on. The act felt significant, a conscious decision to no longer rely on the rearview mirror, to no longer keep them at a distance. Now that there's light, my voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Now that I can see, what do you want? The old man's spectral form remained in the center of the back seat, his gentle sadness now clearly etched on his translucent features. We told you, son. We want you to see. I am seeing, I insisted, gesturing to the illuminated road outside. I can see the road, the trees. Not that kind of seeing. Peter's spectral voice was faint but clear, the sound carrying a hint of the youthful earnestness I remembered. We want you to see us. Really see us. Not as shadows of your guilt, but as who we were. Sarah's spectral gaze met mine, her sorrowful eyes seeming to penetrate my very soul. A single tear, luminous and ethereal, traced a path down her translucent cheek. Remember, the park, the laughter. Her voice was a soft whisper, laced with a pain that echoed my own remorse. The middle-aged man leaned forward slightly, his bewildered expression slowly shifting. His spectral eyes focused on me with a dawning recognition. The red car, you didn't even slow down. His voice was fragmented, filled with a lingering confusion and a hint of accusation. Their words, spoken directly in the light, carried a weight that their silent presence in the darkness hadn't. They were no longer just figments of my tormented mind. They were distinct entities, each with their own story, their own pain, their own unfinished lives. And I was the common thread, the reason for their spectral existence in my car. Tell me, I urged, my voice trembling. Tell me who you were. Tell me about your lives. The old man sighed, a sound like the gentle rustling of autumn leaves. My name was Arthur. I was on my way home from visiting my granddaughter. She had just learned to ride her bicycle. His spectral eyes held a flicker of warmth, a memory of joy amidst the sorrow. Peter's translucent form seemed to straighten slightly. I was Peter. I wanted to be a boxer. It was all I ever dreamed of. A hint of his old determination flickered in his spectral gaze, quickly overshadowed by a shadow of regret. Sarah's whisper was soft but clear. I was Sarah. I loved to draw, and to laugh. You used to laugh with me. Her spectral smile was fleeting, a ghost of the joy I had extinguished. The middle-aged man's voice was still filled with a bewildered sadness. My name was Michael. I was arguing with my wife about something silly. I was just walking it off, trying to clear my head. His spectral gaze held a poignant mix of confusion and loss. Their stories, brief and fragmented as they were, painted vivid pictures of lives abruptly cut short. Arthur, the doting grandfather. Peter, the determined dreamer. Sarah, the joyful artist. Michael, the man caught in a mundane moment. And I, through my reckless actions, had stolen their futures, leaving them as spectral passengers in my nightmarish journey. The weight of their individual stories, added to the collective burden of their presence, was almost unbearable. The darkness within me felt exposed, illuminated by the harsh glare of the headlights and the poignant humanity of the ghosts I carried. What now? The question hung heavy in the illuminated air. I could see them now, truly see them. But what was I supposed to do with this devastating truth? The weight of their names, Arthur, Peter, Sarah, Michael, settled upon me like a physical burden. They were no longer just faceless specters of my guilt, they were individuals with lives, loves, and losses. Their brief stories, whispered in the cold light of the headlights, had humanized them in a way their silent presence hadn't. And in doing so, they had amplified the enormity of my actions. The darkness outside the car was no longer a reflection of my inner state. The headlights cut through the night, revealing a world that was indifferent to my turmoil. The trees stood silent, the road stretched onward, uncaring of the spectral passengers in my back seat and the agonizing guilt that gnawed at my soul. The realization that I had chosen the darkness, that the broken headlights had been a lie I had perpetuated, was a bitter pill to swallow. It stripped away any semblance of excuse, leaving me naked in the harsh glare of my own culpability. I hadn't been a victim of circumstance. I had been the architect of this nightmare. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from fear of the dark, but from the overwhelming weight of remorse. Tears welled in my eyes, blurring the illuminated road ahead. This wasn't just shame, it was a profound and all-consuming grief, grief for the lives I had taken, grief for the person I had become. The spectral figures in the back seat remained visible, their forms still slightly dimmed by the headlights, but their presence was a constant, unwavering reminder. Arthur's gentle sadness, Peter's lingering regret, Sarah's sorrowful gaze, Michael's bewildered confusion, they were etched into my consciousness, impossible to ignore. The silence in the car was heavy, no longer the oppressive silence of the unknown, but the silence of profound understanding and unspoken sorrow. There was a strange sort of communion in our shared space, a silent acknowledgement of the tragedy that had bound us together. My internal monologue was a relentless torrent of self-recrimination. How could I have been so blind? So selfish? So callous? The memories of my interactions with Peter and Sarah, once hazy and conveniently filtered, now played out with brutal clarity, highlighting my insensitivity and cruelty. The image of the unseen impact, the casual disregard for the life I had extinguished, haunted me. Sleep was a distant memory. My body ached with exhaustion, but my mind refused to rest, replaying the events of the night, the encounters with the spectral figures, the devastating realization of my own culpability. The journey continued, but the purpose had shifted. It was no longer a flight into darkness, but a slow, agonizing crawl towards an unknown destination, burdened by the weight of my past. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, but the path to redemption, if such a thing even existed, remained shrouded in shadow. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The spectral figures remained, their presence a constant ache in my chest. They were a part of me now, inextricably linked to my being. Perhaps, I thought with a chilling certainty, they would always be with me, a permanent reminder of the darkness I had embraced and the lives I had shattered. The internal reckoning was far from over. The initial shock of realization had given way to a deep and pervasive sorrow, a crushing weight of guilt that threatened to consume me. The light had revealed the truth, but the path to understanding and potential atonement was still shrouded in the darkness within. The weight of their stories, the weight of their presence, had finally broken through the last vestiges of my self-deception. Arthur, Peter, Sarah, Michael, their names echoed in the silence of the car, a constant reminder of the lives I had extinguished. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, but the path to redemption remained shrouded in the darkness within. The relentless self-recrimination, the agonizing grief, had begun to give way to a flicker of something else, a desperate need for action. I couldn't undo what I had done. I couldn't bring them back. But I could choose what to do with the rest of my life. The spectral figures in the back seat remained, their presence a constant ache, but their expressions seemed different. Arthur's gentle sadness now held a hint of weary patience. Peter's lingering regret was tempered with a strange sort of understanding. Sarah's sorrowful gaze seemed to offer a flicker of forgiveness. Michael's bewildered confusion had given way to a quiet resignation. Their silent presence, their enduring witness to my torment, had become a strange kind of motivation. They were a constant reminder of the consequences of my actions, a living testament to the darkness I had embraced. And perhaps, I thought with a fragile hope, they could also be a guide. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. The urge to flee, to escape this nightmarish journey, had been replaced by a newfound determination. I couldn't run from my past. I couldn't run from them. The only way forward was to confront the darkness, both literal and metaphorical, and to try, however futile it might seem, to atone for what I had done. A concrete decision began to form in my mind. It was a terrifying prospect, a leap into the unknown, but it felt like the only path that offered even a sliver of hope. I needed to turn myself in. The thought, once unthinkable, now felt like an inevitability. I needed to face the consequences of my actions, to accept the punishment I deserved. It wouldn't bring them back, but it might, in some small way, alleviate the crushing weight of my guilt. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The spectral figures remained, their gazes fixed on me, their expressions unreadable. But I sensed, or perhaps imagined, a subtle shift in their presence, a sense of acceptance. "I'm going to turn myself in," I said aloud, my voice trembling but firm. "I'm going to tell them everything." The silence in the car was heavy, charged with unspoken emotion. Then, Arthur's spectral voice, raspy but clear, broke the stillness. "It is time, son." Peter's translucent form seemed to nod slightly. Sarah's spectral hand reached out, a fleeting gesture of something I couldn't quite define. Michael's bewildered expression finally softened, replaced by a look that seemed almost peaceful. The decision was made. The journey had taken a new, terrifying, but ultimately necessary turn. The headlights illuminated the road ahead, but the path to redemption, if it existed, would be long and arduous. And I would walk it, burdened by the weight of my past and accompanied by the ghosts of those I had wronged. The car continued its journey, no longer a flight from the darkness, but a slow, deliberate drive towards the light, however dim and distant it might seem. The spectral figures remained in the back seat, my constant companions, my silent judges, and perhaps, in some strange and unsettling way, my guides. The darkness within me hadn't vanished, but it had begun to yield to a fragile hope, a glimmer of light in the overwhelming darkness. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, I felt a sense of purpose, a reason to continue driving, even with the ghosts of my past as my only company. The headlights cut through the pre-dawn gloom, the darkness slowly yielding to a bruised purple and gray on the horizon. The spectral figures in the back seat remained, their forms now even fainter in the encroaching light, as if the world of the living was beginning to pull them back, or perhaps, their purpose in my journey was nearing its end. The small-town police station appeared on the edge of the emerging light, a low brick building with a single, dimly lit window. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the car. This was it. The moment of reckoning. I pulled into the empty parking lot, the gravel crunching beneath the tires, a stark contrast to the silent, unseen roads I had traveled for so long. Turning off the engine plunged the car into a relative quiet, broken only by the chirping of unseen birds heralding the dawn. For a long moment, I sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my gaze fixed on the police station. Fear, cold and sharp, threatened to overwhelm me. But beneath it, a fragile sense of resolve remained. This was the right thing to do. The only thing to do. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Arthur's spectral form was barely visible now, a faint outline against the lightning sky. Peter and Sarah were even less distinct, like fading memories. Michael's bewildered expression had completely vanished, replaced by an almost serene stillness. "Thank you," I whispered into the empty space, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for showing me the way." Whether they heard me or not, I couldn't tell. But as I opened the car door and stepped out into the cool morning air, I felt a sense of release. The oppressive weight in the car seemed to have lifted, as if their presence, having served its purpose, was beginning to dissipate. The walk to the police station felt both impossibly long and terrifyingly short. Each step was a commitment, a further severing of ties with the darkness I had embraced. Inside, the air was stale and quiet. A lone officer sat behind the front desk, looking tired and surprised to see someone at this early hour. My voice trembled as I spoke. I need to report something. I've hurt people." The officer looked up, his expression shifting from weary indifference to cautious attention. "What happened?" I took a deep breath, the cool morning air filling my lungs. The words tumbled out, a confession years in the making, a recounting of the darkness, the blindness, and the spectral passengers who had finally guided me to this place. As I spoke, the first rays of the rising sun streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the room. The darkness of the night was finally receding, replaced by the harsh, unforgiving light of day. The journey was far from over. The consequences of my actions awaited. But as I stood there, bathed in the pale light of dawn, a fragile seed of hope began to sprout within the barren landscape of my soul. The darkness within hadn't vanished entirely, but for the first time, it felt as if there might be a path towards something resembling peace, however distant and difficult. The ghosts were silent now, but their presence, their stories, would forever be etched within me, a constant reminder of the darkness I had overcome, and the light I had finally chosen to face.